magic in the air. Before I go feel the magic in the air. Feel the magic in the air.
What is up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Planet Soccer Show or podcast, depending on where you're watching or listening. We are going to be putting all of these up on YouTube. As you know, if you watched our preview pod, I am Reed Simpson. That's Dylan Wilcox up in Michigan. This is the Group A World Cup preview, following our upload of kind of an overview of the tournament as a whole that we uploaded, I'll say earlier today, because I think we're going to get groups A and B up today. So all three will be uploaded today. Really excited to talk about all these groups, starting with Group A here today. It's not the sexiest group. It's not the most exciting group. It's the host nation group. So for those of you who don't know, the host nation always gets a bid to the World Cup. So this is Qatar's group. Dylan, where do we start with Group A? We start at the top, right? You have to.
So before I start, I am a little disappointed in my co-host right now, changing his background and sweatshirt when I am still wearing the same sweatshirt as yesterday, because now it's very obvious. If it was just your sweatshirt, I think I could have got by with it, but you changed your background on me too, so I'm hopeless at this point. Everybody watching knows I was bumming it today, working from home, and wore the same sweatshirt as last night. So appreciate that. But as far as Group A goes,
sorry.
Now that I outed myself for the non-YouTube subscribers, I think it's a very I'm even hesitant to say top heavy, because that kind of implies two teams. But for me, it's really Netherlands and I don't know what. It's probably Senegal. Senegal is the most likely team to advance, but it does seem like African nations can struggle at times in the World Cup. So there are some questions around, as good as this Senegal team may be, are they good enough to kind of not break the curse? There's not necessarily a curse, but kind of get over that hump for African nations that do seem to struggle in the World Cup, because they are a very class side. There is a lot of talent on this team. Shades of Ivory Coast 2010 kind of talent for me as far as this Senegal team goes. So I do think it'll be a pretty straightforward group, with Netherlands very safely finishing the group in first, and Senegal likely quite safely finishing the group in second. But we'll see how it goes. It's the World Cup, so you never really know. I do kind of think if there is going to be an AFCON team that really does show up at the World Cup, the Senegal team has all the makings of one. We'll kind of dive into that a little bit later as to why I feel that way, but I do feel pretty good about this Senegal team, while other people may not feel as positive about them.
I've seen some pretty solid projections for Senegal. I think talent-wise, they could potentially make a quarterfinal run. They have those type of players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you said, though, it's whether that talent will mesh, and I feel like they don't play together a lot. I feel like these European countries are always on international break, always playing with each other. And other than AFCON, I haven't really heard about at least Spurs African players going out and playing these random Nations League friendlies, whatever the case may be. So we will see. Talent-wise, they're absolutely capable of advancing deep into the tournament. Let's go ahead and start, though, with our projections. So as you mentioned, Netherlands are the favorite. We both have them coming in first. Do we want to do these now or at the end? We didn't talk about that before. I think we did them.
Let's save them. Well, let's kind of jump into...
Spoiler alert, Netherlands is first for both of us. We'll leave the rest as a mystery. Yeah. Okay, so let's start off with the host nation, Qatar. Dylan, I'll take this one.
Thank you.
Because I have a lot to say.
I'm
Just
sure.
kidding. I don't at all. Qatar is coached by Felix Sanchez. They are ranked 50th in the world, which is 5th in the Asian Confederation League Conference. whatever that's called, which was kind of surprising to me, honestly, to be ranked top 50, fifth in the Asia group. I didn't really expect that, but um, they played well in qualifying, albeit they were already through because they're the host and they were in a group with Oman, India, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh. They did have a plus 18 goal differential. I think they scored 18 goals in 8 games. I'm sorry, plus 17 goal differential, 18 goals in 8 games. So, they didn't struggle to score. However, we'll see if that translates to the World Cup. I don't know anything about this team. I'm going to be completely honest. I know most of their squad plays in the Qatar Stars League or Qatar Pro League, I think it's called. So they'll essentially be playing de facto home games, whether that be either in their home country or stadiums that they're already familiar with. I think most of the stadiums are built new, but surely there's at least one that one of these big Qatar teams has already played in. Dylan, out of these notes, anything stand out to you about Qatar? Do we know how host nations, like how did South Africa do in the World Cup? I think they got like a draw, didn't they? While he does that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about.
I want to actually say that they won the game. There's so much about that 2010 World Cup that I absolutely love, and I can't remember South Africa doing great, but I do think they won a game against somebody.
Have you seen the documentary on YouTube about it? It like is about the final and takes like a bunch of different people who participated in the game, whether it's a player or like a staff member in the stadium or like a fan, and it goes through that whole day of the final.
It's like their own experience. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it ends with Iniesta.
Tweet that out on our Twitter for like our 20 some odd followers and me. That sounds kind of cool though. For the record, South Africa did win a match, and I am willing to give you. We won't do this on air. I would be willing to give you 30 guesses as to who they beat, and I don't think you could get it without looking up who was in their group.
I'll try that off air. I'll do it off air.
They
just
beat
tell
France.
Me.
They beat France.
Really?
Yeah, on the last match day.
Hey,
they drew Mexico.
Defending... Oh wait,
got
France
smacked by Diego Forlan's Uruguay, and then lost. And then beat France 2-1, and France finished last in the group in the 2010 World Cup. So
that was
that kind of goes to show, like, some of these like power countries, like we kind of joked in our intro preview overview, whatever you want to call it, about Italy not making the World Cup, but like even these powerhouse countries, like that's how hard international football can be for some of these sides.
Yeah.
I think for Qatar, kind of bringing it back to this group specifically, I think there's been a lot of talk around the conspiracies, bribery, what will you, about them becoming the host nation. And if you look at who they've played in the last 3 years or so, their FIFA ranking seems a little bit skewed based on results against very poor sides. If you look at the even just their qualifying, they didn't need to qualify, but they did still participate in an initial qualifying group. And as you said, they kind of ran through that group. But overall group talent, as far as FIFA ranking, wasn't the best. Let's just leave it at that. So I do think this could be an instance of FIFA doing FIFA things and kind of hyping up the host nation to make people feel like, well, they kind of deserve it. I mean, they're decent. They're in the 50s, and there are other teams that are in the 50s that qualified. So giving them an automatic isn't ugly. So, I mean, I hate to be like the earth is flat kind of conspiracy theorist with FIFA, but FIFA's given me zero reason to fully believe in them, especially in this World Cup. So part of me
there's no such thing as a conspiracy theorist when it comes to FIFA, because it's all on the
possible.
Table.
It's all legitimately possible. And so for me, like this Qatari team, as you said, like I know nothing about them really. I haven't watched a lot of them, but I do know when looking at who they've played in the last 3 or 4 years since being given the 2022 World Cup, it's a little suspect. So I take that ranking with a grain of salt, and maybe they prove me wrong. Maybe they take that home field advantage, prove me wrong, and look a fully legitimate side. But I definitely have my reservations, and anticipate them to mightily struggle in this group.
As you should. So there's your 5 minutes on Qatar, everybody. Enjoy watching them play. Let's move on to Ecuador. Ecuador is Dylan. Those were all great points. I don't mean to just completely dismiss what you said.
Oh, you're
of course,
good.
those were.
You're right. Probably enough time on the Qatari national football team.
Hey, I was struggling to think we would get anything on them, so at least we put something on paper, or the air, whatever. Yeah, you know what I mean. Ecuador, a pretty young team. They're kind of coming into a new generation of Ecuadorian soccer. There's been some controversy surrounding them through like ineligible player in qualifying, and one of their wins shouldn't counted, something of that nature. Forgot exactly what the story was, but they're going to be in the World Cup. It's too late at this point for them to be axed, I think. They're coached by Gustavo Alfaro. FIFA ranking, as Dylan just mentioned, there's just in general, whether it's conspiracy or not, I want y'all to just understand that FIFA ranking isn't generally the best scientific way to determine who are the best international teams. Some of, even at the top, some of the standings are very questionable, but Ecuador is just a few spots ahead of Qatar, which feels weird to me. It feels like they should be significantly better. Go ahead.
They
You
are
have something? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, just gonna keep feeding my Qatar conspiracy theory to everybody. I do feel like Ecuador is a much better side. There is promise there, like you said. They're young, but I do believe there's significant or substantial promise there, more so than Qatar. I mean, I think I believe they finished fourth in CONMEBOL, however you want to pronounce it.
CONMEBOL.
Sure, CONMEBOL. Yeah, that actually makes a lot more sense. CONMEBOL. I always read CONMEBOL for whatever reason. CONMEBOL. They did finish fourth, and like that's nothing to turn your nose up at. I mean, Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay are always going to finish ahead of Ecuador for the most part. But being able to finish ahead of the Perus, the Colombias, the Chiles, the Paraguays, who all have power or top 5 league players on their side, it's nothing to turn your nose up at. So, and that's part of the reason I have that Qatar conspiracy, because you can't tell me whoever finishes fourth in CONMEBOL is only 8-9 spots ahead of Qatar. Like, again, haven't seen Qatar. We said this in past and future podcasts that I just don't know a ton about the Asian Confederation. I just don't. So maybe I'm wrong on this, but it is a little suspect that they're 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, spots ahead of Qatar and a much, much tougher confederation.
Yeah. Kind of a good segue to what I was going to say is CONMEBOL. It's no joke for qualifying. I mean, it's not Europe where there's the depth of teams, but there's no slouches. Kind of similar to how CONCACAF is in a way. You have some slouches in CONCACAF, but it's none of these places are easy to go play. None of these places are easy to go qualify. And Ecuador qualifying, quite frankly, was a pretty big upset in the world of CONMEBOL. I think they're ranked behind Colombia, Peru, and Chile for that 4th spot because, as we mentioned, there's kind of that top tier. There's really Brazil, Argentina, then Uruguay's right below them. Historically, they've been on the same level-ish. Then there's kind of Colombia, Peru, Ecuador, Chile, kind of all jumbled in that mix. And Ecuador's actually ranked lower than Colombia, Peru, and Chile. However, they're kids. They did it. They qualified, and good for them. So they're going to come into the World Cup. Nobody's really going to be watching them, excited to watch them. Nobody's going to take them seriously, probably. But they've been kind of a trendy pick to get that 2nd spot in this group. And I don't necessarily disagree. I think if they catch Senegal on the wrong day, then they could. Dylan shaking his head, but I mean, there's always upsets in the World Cup. There's always going to be teams that get through that we don't expect.
Yeah, I mean, like we just touched on when talking about past hosts. I mean, friggin' South Africa beat France, and it's a down year for France, but in theory, South Africa should never beat France. So yes, there's certainly an opportunity here for Ecuador. I don't think they are 100% outmatched by Senegal by any means, but pure talent, I see a very strong likelihood that Senegal wins 2 matches and there's no chance, in my opinion, Ecuador wins 2 matches. So
That's bulletin board material. They're going to have that up on their locker room now. This is what
give
Dylan
it to 'em.
Wilcox in
Give it
Michigan
to them.
said.
Come and listen to our podcast, Ecuadorian national team. Please give us all of the listens, all of the follows. I will be your bulletin board material. Invite me to qualifiers next year so I can just trash you if you must. But I mean, in all seriousness, no, like I just don't see a world where Ecuador can finish with more points than Senegal. I think Netherlands is very, very clearly the favorite in this group, and I think Senegal is very clearly the second. But we'll see. I mean, like we said, crazier things have happened in the World Cup in the past. They've already kind of played that underdog role in qualifying, so they kind of know what that's like, and maybe they can pull it off. But I'm certainly not betting on them to pull off that surprise upset.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet on them either. But hey, I think it's possible. I believe in you, Ecuador. Let's talk about how they play just for a second. Ecuador, their strength is on their back line, at center back and particularly left back, with Estupinan. Is that how you say Estupinan?
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that.
I don't know.
And then Hincapi for Leverkusen. God, man, these pronunciations, they're going to get us on this podcast. It's brutal.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. Offensively, they build up on the wings. However, if they're just isolated to one side, they struggle to advance the ball. So they have to be balanced on both sides. And yeah, they have a decent midfield link up play. However, they're going to have to put the ball in the back of the net on some pretty good defenses in this group in order to advance. And I just don't know if I see that happening. So moving on to Senegal. Dylan, I'll let you start with Senegal.
Yeah. So we got Senegal currently ranked 20th by FIFA. So as we said, significantly more talented than the other two teams in the group. Coached by or managed by.
They've actually moved up to 18th since
18
I put
now?
that in there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. We just had new rankings, and we did not go back through this since we show prepped. So apologies, but they are now 18th. So even more to my point, they are even farther ahead, likely, than the other two. They are managed or coached by Aliou Cisse, and Koulibaly is their captain. Well, most recently, Koulibaly was their captain. We'll obviously see who captains them at the World Cup. Right now, they are currently 14th best odds to win at plus 8 to 9,000, depending on where you grab it at. And they almost have a advantage here, kind of, with their schedule. I think getting the Netherlands game out of the way early might not be a bad thing, and I think that kind of helps them. You get Qatar in that second match, that should absolutely, no doubt, without a question, be a win. And then it kind of comes down to that final match day. It's truly like it likely will truly be a head-to-head with Ecuador for that final spot, and I think that's something that is kind of advantage Senegal. So that's part of the reason. We'll get into our predictions later, but part of the reason I have it going the way I do. But man, they have been, I don't want to say on fire because I haven't watched or followed them quite enough to say they're on fire. But they won their first AFCON title this year, beat Salah and Egypt on penalties in the finals with a whole lot of controversy around laser pointers and Egypt, and say what you will about it, but they still came out on top and won their first
AFCON
ever
is
AFCON.
Wild.
AFCON's honestly one of my favorite tournaments to watch. Like, I would rather watch, I would probably put it World Cup as far as international football. I'd probably put it World Cup, Euros, AFCON, CONCACAF qualifying, everything else. But like, CONCACAF qualifying is wild. AFCON, for those of you who have never experienced it, is 2, 3, 4 times as wild. And Europa is just Europa is just flat out better competition than AFCON, but if you're looking for like you said, kind of circus level football, like AFCON is fantastic. And so there was some controversy around them winning AFCON, but nevertheless they got to the finals. They won AFCON, had never done it before, and I think this is kind of we talk about it in the U.S. a lot with like the golden generation. I think we're kind of seeing a little bit of that with Senegal. Maybe not quite the depth of golden generation we're seeing with the U.S., but that top line talent is, I mean, much better than that golden era for the U.S. So it's a very exciting time for the Senegalese national team, and I think a lot of people are really excited to see them, and see if they are able to take that momentum from AFCON into the World Cup. See if Mane can put a team kind of on his back. It may be an extreme, but be able to score and kind of carry a team through group stage. They have Koulibaly as well and Mendy as well. It's a pretty solid side. For an African team, which we typically, without being too stereotypical, typically don't see in the World Cup, an African team that looks like a team that should make a solid quarterfinal run.
Yeah, I think uncharacteristic for a lot of the African teams we've seen in the past, this team is so well balanced. We've typically seen these AFCON teams, skewed one to either great defense or, most recently with Ivory Coast, they're on the attack. Just it you look at the Senegalese team and there's really no holes. They're solid at each of the four levels with Mendy at back. So, I mean, I think if they're definitely the most talented team in Africa, just bar none. Like, Egypt made the run that they did, but Senegal is on paper probably the best African team. They're hot right now. They have a coach who has the backing of his country and his players, and there's just a lot going for them right now. I think the first time we recorded this, we had the conversation of would we see an African team win the World Cup in our lifetime, and if we did, who would it be? And I don't think we will, but I think the first team to do it will be Senegal.
For me, that's tough to say, because like in 2010, everybody would have said the same thing about Ivory Coast, and now they're where they're at. But like,
yeah,
I think this is as close or as good of a team as we've had out of Africa since Ivory Coast. So like, I don't see any reason that couldn't happen. But things seem to turn over so much more and so much quicker in Africa than a lot of those other confederations that's probably tough. Like I do think, like I feel like one of the questions I see all the time is an African nation going to win first, or is a CONCACAF nation going to win first? And but it, like I don't know, because like the U.S. feels to do like U.S. things. Mexico is very much on the downturn, and while Canada's on the upswing, like you can't tell me Canada's ever gonna win a World Cup. No offense, neighbors to the north. Don't drive across the Ambassador Bridge and find me. But like I just don't see Canada winning. So it's kind of on the U.S.'s shoulder. So it's like, is the U.S. or Mexico going to win first, or is any nation in Africa going to win? And a Senegal team like this, where I think they are just as good, if not better, than both the U.S. and Mexico. It's like, man, I don't know. Like pre-AFCON tournament, I probably, and coming off the backs of, U.S. Gold Cup, I'm probably saying no way does AFCON win before CONCACAF, but at this point it is kind of tough. And I think it's kind of I wish it was like somehow a rivalry. Like I wish we had like an inner confederation tournament between the two, because like we are the next best.
We call that the World Cup.
But like I want one strictly between the two on like off years. Like instead of playing CONCACAF Nations League, like our version of Euros, like I wish we could like convince them to, play something on top of AFCON, because both confederations are a bit above Asia at this point and a bit below South America and Europe. So it would be kind of cool, because that's always the question: what's the third best confederation? And we don't really have a good way to answer that. For me, if you put the U.S., Canada, Mexico, and Senegal in a group, Senegal's probably winning the group.
Today, this year,
like
for
this
sure.
World Cup, if that was, I mean, mathematically, physically, that's not possible. But
I think it's hard to deny
that's just where I'm at with Senegal. I do think they're better than the three CONCACAF teams that are in it, or four, I guess, with Costa Rica too. But
without spending too much without spending too much time on Senegal, I just want to highlight one other kind of caveat about these African teams is you have a lot of players who have African eligibility for several countries. One player wouldn't be for several countries, but players who end up playing for the French national team, the English national team, the German national team, who have eligibility for these African countries. So if you see kind of a shift of some of these players starting to do that, which we have seen, which we'll talk about in a later group, then they definitely have a chance because these are players who have grown up in Europe, have gone through the European system with the facilities, the coaches, and then just come back and play for the African national team. So they do have that going for them. Let's go ahead and move on to the last team in this group, the Netherlands. We talked about the embarrassment of riches that England did have it right back before all the injuries. That's kind of similar to what the Netherlands has at center back in this squad. But just start with kind of like an overview. They're coached by Louis van Gaal, FIFA ranking 10. I think that's actually changed. It is 8 now. So moving up in the world. Good for Netherlands. Like you said, they do open up with Senegal. So both of those teams get their toughest game, if you will, out of the way real quick.
And I can honestly kind of see both of them. Not that they'll like agree to anything before. No conspiracies here on that. But like they'd both be content with the draw, feeling very comfortable.
It won't be the
moving
most
forward.
Physical game we've ever watched in our
Right.
life.
You're probably going to see some safe play. Nobody taking overly crazy risk, which is kind of a shame because Netherlands Senegal on paper is a very exciting match. So I hope I'm wrong, but I just wouldn't bank on this being as an exciting game as it seems like it would be on paper.
Yeah. No, I don't discredit that at all. I think the Netherlands, they play a certain style that we'll get into kind of later in this podcast and talk about Dutch football, total football as a whole. It's basically the concept of one guy on the field can play every position if he needs to. It just creates a real synchronized squad. And I think you always really see that out of the Netherlands. They're always formidable. It's a small country in Europe. They shouldn't be able to compete with Germany and England and France and Spain and Portugal, but they do, and they have for 100 years. So there's kind of just something about this sport that's ingrained in that country that makes them a European powerhouse, which I think when I started, I think the 2010 World Cup was like when I was old enough to fully realize what I was like watching in sports, especially sports I wasn't familiar with. So like I understood MLB, all that. But I'm watching this World Cup and I'm like, the Netherlands, really? They're good at soccer? Like that's
Right.
random. And of course they, just littered with superstars, all timers on that team. So I have a soft spot for the Netherlands, those, orange kits. It's a sight to behold when they're running around. What do you have on their squad this year, Dylan?
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly kind of high on them. It seems like a side that I don't know why I feel this way because it's just not accurate. But I feel like it's a side that I get excited for every year, or every World Cup, and somehow am disappointed. But like when you look back at their track record, that's just not the case. I think the biggest question on this side though is their goal scoring ability. Like we said, they're extremely deep on the back line. They have a very, very solid midfield led by Frankie de Jong. But Memphis Depay is their striker. He is a phenomenal striker. I think when we initially recorded our back in June or July, our preview intro, we went into who we thought was going to win Golden Boot, hot takes, and I had Depay at leading scorer or tied for leading scorer after group stages. Partially because of the group, partially because of the team, partially because of how well he plays for Netherlands. But right now, his injury is a huge question mark for this team. And while I don't think by any means it will, even if he's out for the tournament, I don't think it would keep them from advancing out of the group. But it would raise concerns about how far can they advance after group stage without him. Because I think a lot of the team does filter kind of through him. I mean, we've seen Cody Gakpo at PSV have a phenomenal year. He's probably top of every Premier League
Yeah.
team's list right now. I don't think there's a team that would turn him away. I mean, he's played phenomenal in Champions League, played phenomenal in the Dutch league. I started to try and pronounce the name of that league, and we're going to go with the Dutch league. So there is possibility. If Depay is out, Gakpo could play up top. I think he's better suited on the wing. So we'll see how that works out. I think if both Gakpo and Depay are healthy, I think it is a team that could make a little bit of a run, because I do think those are two very talented players with a very solid midfield and back line behind them. Now, when I say run, I'm not talking like going to make a run to the finals, but could certainly see them making the semifinals reasonably without it being like a major upset if both of them are healthy and firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, if they click, they have the potential to make a very deep run. I just want to correct you real fast. We said Champions League. He's done in the Champions League this year. PSV's actually in the
Europa he's in
League.
Europa. He is in Europa.
Yeah,
Come on, he just now. Had to. Yes,
I can't just throw around the Champions League to anybody. No, but Cody he's taken the world by storm. Let's call it what it is. You know, he's at the top of Manchester United's transfer list. Yeah, everybody. Yeah. I could list all of the big clubs throughout Europe. And then, at the back, just to mention some of the names, Virgil van Dijk, Matthias de Ligt, Sven Botman. Sven, is that how you say his first name? Mm-hmm. Sven Botman.
Yeah, like the Frozen character, exactly.
Yeah. Nathan Ake. I mean, there's so many. Jurrien Timber. They have depth at center back. They could afford an injury to one of these guys in the weeks leading up to the World Cup. Maybe not 3 like England's gotten to their right backs, but it's certainly an embarrassment of riches at center back. And then who's their starting goalkeeper? Is it Bilo?
That I am not 100% sure.
None of these names stick out to me. That might be embarrassing. It might be like somebody obvious, but their center backs are their goalkeepers. Essentially, they essentially form a wall in front of the opposition's net. So Netherlands won't need to score a lot, but they will need to score timely goals to make a deep run, I think.
I certainly agree. That back line is great. There is some depth with it being, as we've said on probably every episode, so I apologize for mentioning it again, being a mid-season World Cup, injuries are certainly a conversation point, and they do have depth at their best position where by no means do I think Sven Botman should or will or in any world start ahead of De Ligt or Van Dijk, but hey, if you have to put him in for a game or two while one of them clears up a knock before the knockout stage, you're not in trouble. He's proven in the Premier League to be a very, very formidable center back. So to have that depth and that embarrassment of riches, like you said, is a huge plus for a team that we don't really know a lot about their keeper because he plays in the Dutch league. So not that he can't be good because he plays in the Dutch league, but he's just flat out a keeper the average fan won't know. So he's likely not going to win a game standing on his head. So you do need to have a very solid back line, and they certainly have that, and they certainly have that with a bit of depth as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that pretty much covers Netherlands, at least to the extent that we're going to do on this podcast. Let's get to our predictions. I'll go first on this one. I've got Netherlands finishing the group with 3 wins, getting through on 9 points. Senegal with 6 wins versus Ecuador and Qatar with 3 with a win versus. Ecuador with 3 with a win versus Qatar. I really wanted to make that game a draw, give them both 1 point, just because maybe Qatar will come out in that first game and sneak out a draw. But I gave it to the talent. I gave it to Ecuador.
So I do have. Technically, Netherlands in first as well, but I have them on 7 points. I'm pretty high on Senegal this year, higher than most probably are. So I do see them stealing a draw, but Netherlands finishing ahead of them based on goal differential or goals for. Not sure which it'll be, but I do see them just absolutely taking it to a team like Qatar And then I see Senegal and Netherlands both beating Ecuador. But I do see Ecuador getting a lone win against Qatar. So I have it Netherlands 7, but first, Senegal 7 in second, Ecuador 3 in third, and Qatar 0 in fourth. I don't know if there are books taking bets on over under a half point for Qatar. I will probably look into that in the next month. And if there is, that is probably a bet I'm taking because I don't think Ecuador is a bad side. And I certainly do not believe in Qatar as being a good side. And the other two, I don't see there being any way that Qatar can steal a point, home nation or not. South Africa beating France in 2010 be damned. Like I just don't see that being a possibility in this group.
Yeah, I don't either. It's definitely one of the weaker host nations we've had, at least on the pitch, in the past several World Cups, especially with Brazil mixed in there and various other locations, Russia. Starting 11, Dylan.
He who shall not be named.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll do I'll kind of run through we compiled a best 11 here. Full disclosure, this was done back in June or July initially, and we have made some changes. But at goalkeeper, at this point in time, I still do have Mendy at goalkeeper from Senegal. He has been hurt / semi-replaced this year. It was initially an injury, but they seem to leave him out of the lineup now that he is healthy at Chelsea. But he's shown it on the big stage, whether it be Champions League, AFCON, whatever competition you want to talk about. He's been there, he's done that. So without a doubt, the keeper for me. At left back, I have Diallo from Senegal. Center back, I have De Ligt and Van Dijk. No surprise there. And then at right back, Dumfries, who probably technically is more of a midfielder, but does play right back at Inter a bit. And I think is, from everybody we looked at in this group, the premier right back option. At center mid, we have Frankie de Jong. At center defensive mid, we have Keita from Senegal. And then at the other center mid, I am blanking on who else we had here because this was a replacement. So hopefully,
yeah, it was Berghuis.
That's right.
Berghuis. I don't know how you say it.
Yes, the Ajax midfielder that
Ajax
isn't Steven
midfielder.
Bergwijn. That every time I watch a game, I get the two confused when the announcer says something until I actually look at the pitch. So that again, that midfield is Frankie de Jong, Keita, and then Berghuis, not Bergwijn. And then the front three, we have Sadio Mane on the left, Memphis Depay in the middle, and then Cody Gakpo on the right, with the understanding that there is a chance that Memphis Depay is not healthy. But at this point in time, it does look like he will most likely be healthy. So we do have him slotted there as our striker.
Yes, we do. And that is the best 11 for Group A. Guys, I promise you the other groups will be more exciting than this. This just is not a very
probably the
exciting
least
group.
exciting group, to be fair.
It is without a doubt
It's a
the
good
least
one to get out of the
exciting
way.
group.
If you found this episode entertaining with this group, you'll have a ball with the rest of the groups because this one is not the most exciting to listen to Americans talk about. But if you made it through this and enjoyed it, I promise you will really enjoy the next seven groups we'll have out.
Yeah, we'll get through B, and then for Group C, Dylan will have a new webcam, so he'll be nice and shiny in 4K.
About time. Sorry.
And we'll rock and roll on the rest of these. So appreciate you guys listening. Group B will be posted by the time you're watching this, so just head on over there. Honestly, probably should have just skipped this one and head right to Group B. But we will talk to y'all later. Appreciate you listening. Y'all have a good night. Peace out.